Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Formula, and we are live ahead of qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix, and I missed us. Terry, it's good to be back.
Welcome back. You all right? How you doing? How was your break?
I'm so excited. I had a great break. I missed all of you. I'm ready to dive into some craziness because of the Kimi Antonelli crash. We have so much to talk about, so let's dive right into it. If anybody's new around here, we'll be here for 1 hour right up until the lineup lock deadline, just before qualifying. Feel free to send us your questions, send us your lineups. If you're a member of the channel, you'll get prioritized lineup review and it'll be shared up on the screen. And Terry and I are going to walk you through all of the data we use to set our teams. And if we get enough likes on the bottom, we'll share our teams live with you earlier than we usually do. So make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already.
Wow. All of that. I don't even know where to start. Where do we start?
I want to start by saying hi to some friends that I missed.
Yeah.
Hey, Race Maven. Hey, Trevor. Welcome to the chat. Got a lot of people we haven't seen in a long time here, so I'm excited to kick things off.
Yeah, welcome back. If you're new, welcome. If you're old, welcome back.
Let's jump right into the free practice 3 data because there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to start at the bottom where some of the more boring things are happening. Another tough session for Cadillac. They've been either out of the car or at the bottom of the timetables, pretty much all 3 free practice sessions. Aston Martin didn't even run Lance Stroll. That's why there's only 21 classifications here. Aston Martin, if you haven't heard yet, are planning to both retire Alonso and Stroll. So it's going to be minus 20 for them. Make sure you don't touch them. Carlos Sainz out of the session very early with a power unit issue. Alex Albon had a quick tussle with a power unit issue in the session, and that's after he had an issue with his hydraulics in FP2. So Williams, we know they're running a bit heavy and they're running slow and they're having some power unit issues. So we're starting to avoid some of these constructors early on. Now, Terry, my first question for you is as we move up the grid, the big question, we're going to get this a lot in the next hour. What is the best tier B constructor? Because Haas and Racing Bulls have been trading blows all weekend long. Who stands out?
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, I still got Haas because of that Ferrari power unit, if I'm honest. Racing Bulls look quite solid, though, and especially Arvid. His performance this weekend has been brilliant, to be honest. And we've seen a couple of problems with that Ford power unit, but nothing major, I want to say. So it's still straight. So I'm still going for Haas. I think I've got Haas in a couple of mine when I've looked at it. So I'm still going with those, but I'm not too sure you're going to lose too much by going Racing Bulls, if I'm honest, at the moment. I think they're going to both be there or thereabouts.
Let me ask you, is that because you trust the reliability of the Ferrari power unit, or is there anything to make of these race starts where you think there could be a couple of overtakes right off the bat that could get Haas a little bit closer to the points positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ford and Red Bull have produced a really good engine. I think they surprised quite a few people. The Ferrari engine looks solid, as we know from preseason testing. I think overtaking is still going to be tricky. I think whilst the drivers are understanding it, trying to get to grips with it, energy deployment, energy mapping, all those new things. So I think at start off the line might get you that positions and then you hold it rather than lose it. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards them rather than Racing Bulls. I kind of feel like Arvid may qualify high then drop back, is my thinking. So even though I think on one of my teams I've still got him into kind of like with the way the scoring works and the budget left to put him in, I think he might go backwards rather than forwards, whereas I think Haas might make off the start and stay, if that makes sense.
This is where I'm thinking too. I'm worried about Racing Bulls qualifying high and dropping back a little bit. Yeah. Haas could have a little bit more of that overtake potential. They have led the grid in this category each of the last 2 seasons. So I'm leaning a little bit more toward Haas, but they cost a bit more. Means you can't run Behrman on your team. Got to have some of those cheaper drivers at the bottom of your lineup. So tricky decision there that we'll be debating throughout the hour. And then as we move up a bit of a mixed bag for McLaren. Piastri topped the times in FP2, but he was a little bit slower in FP3. Lando nowhere to be found. And some of that long run pace for the McLarens is looking a little bit unnerving. So I think I'm going to start leaning outside of McLaren, even though they're the reigning drivers and constructors champs. But then as we can't avoid the P7 Q3 finish. I mean, FP3 finish.
Cool. Adam's got on mute and on that. So whilst Adam's frozen on my
gotten that car in a position to compete in qualifying.
Sorry, you froze my end then.
Oh no.
You're back. Don't worry. Don't panic. It's the first race of the season. It's gonna happen.
We're just working out the kinks here like we always do.
Absolutely. Go back to McLaren. I mean, to be honest, I didn't catch the last part of what you said, but in terms of McLaren, I've seen the question in there already about McLaren and Red Bull going to be better. I'm worried about both those. So Red Bull kind of feels like you're expecting something to come out from now, if I'm honest, with Max's car. You kind of expected a banker lap somewhere, a bit of a lean into this is what we've got, a bit like we saw with Mercedes and George Russell. So I think for them, they're still not shown. McLaren have been a real surprise to me. They're not really shown. They got that Mercedes engine, so you kind of expect them to be strong from what we're seeing from Mercedes, particularly George, but they haven't shown it yet. And is it sandbagging? Is it they've not quite got the same thing? We know they don't use the same gearbox as what Mercedes do. They actually use some different parts, which not a lot of people realise. So even though they got the Mercedes engine, the likes of Williams, Alpine, they take Mercedes gearbox as well. McLaren don't. They actually design their own to go with their own rear suspension side of things. So that it is slightly different in the McLaren what they've got. So whether or not that's also playing a part in all this, as they're still trying to iron out how they integrate it into their system, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest.
So then at the top of the pile, you have Mercedes, and George Russell put on a real statement of a lap at the end of practice 3. He had a set of softs on that had a bit of a heat cycle through them before the Antonelli crash, which we'll get to next. And then he put on a lap that was 7/10 clear of Leclerc. And even when Hamilton came through after, 6/10 clear of Lewis. So it looks like that Mercedes is going to be on a charge all weekend. Probably my leading driver for the 2X boost at the moment. I got to talk about Antonelli next, though. That crash was huge. We're probably going to have to put you to work in this hour, Terry, to figure out if Mercedes are going to have a car on track for the start of Q1.
And my initial thoughts is it's doubtful looking at it. I mean, we're not seeing anything official yet, but looking at that car, I would be very surprised if that makes it for qualifying. So I think we've got to work on the realistic game at the moment that he's not going to make qualifying, so he's going to take those minus points. But then I'm looking at George Russell, seeing a car that is capable of overtaking, looks like a rocket ship, and then does he become a really strong asset in the sense of coming back, which I'm sure is a question that's appearing right up in the chat here, because ultimately I think that Kimi in that car could come back through when it's repaired, but I think you have to take the -1 in the sense of he's not going to make qualifying, which kind of puts him from a really strong asset into a really big question mark on it.
My phone just went off because Riders FP3 Sims, assuming an Antonelli pit lane start, have just come out.
Oh,
so this is breaking news. So let me head over here.
Oh, look, yeah.
I'm going to refresh here and look what we have. Antonelli at the top of the individual driver scores here at 34.8. So there's an assumption. Let's see if I come over here to some of the percentages. Yeah, the assumption here is 14 overtakes. So just to step you through this, if he doesn't participate in qualifying, it's -5 points for the not classified. He'll start at the back of the grid, probably a pit lane start, so he'll avoid any turn 1 carnage. He's going to be carving up the likes of Aston Martin, Cadillac, Audi, Alpine. So that's 8 very free overtakes for him right there, and 16 points. So then he has to work his way through the teams we talked about a moment ago in Racing Bulls and Haas to then fight his way back into the top 10. And now there's a chance. Look at this. Driver of the day would be 61% if he's on for it. So now all of a sudden Antonelli is well and truly back in the picture. And so look at some of the options we have for our teams. These Antonelli-Russell combinations with Ferrari as a constructor could be quite huge now.
Absolutely. That top team looks quite interesting, doesn't it? I'm trying to see if I've got one of these teams actually quite similar. I did have one with a double Mercedes in there somewhere.
I see some friends coming up in the chat. Hey, Brian, BZ's back. Rick's back. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, welcome. Should I look at some questions? Because I think there's loads fun in there.
Let's do it. Let's see. Craig is thinking Audi or Racing Bulls better than Haas for pit stop points potential. Totally right on Racing Bulls. I mean, last year you had Ferrari and then Red Bull, and Racing Bulls were right after them and well ahead of Mercedes and the likes of Haas. So that's one bean on the scale for Racing Bulls. I would like to try to avoid teams like this where you have triple Racing Bulls, because man, if one incident befalls Lindblad or Lawson, it's going to hit you really hard here.
Yeah, I was playing with a team earlier, and it had obviously double Cadillac in, and it kind of just made me nervous that putting your eggs in that basket feels too risky, to be honest. in terms of the offset with everything else.
It does. It does. And then Tim had that same question. Thoughts on V-carb versus Audi for constructor? Leaning V-carb. I think if we look at reliability, I think Haas is a little bit better than V-carb, but they're close. Audi is a bit of an unknown entity as a new engine manufacturer. So I'd like to see them just survive a couple of races before I get too into them as the second constructor. But I'm with Race Maven. This is nuts. Just throw out everything we know now, because this new Rider sim has really thrown a monkey wrench into everything we're trying to do now.
Rich has brought up a good question. Why no Mercedes and V-carb constructor combo? Because actually, that's a really strong combo. Looking at that sim set, Ferrari looks strong as well. But is it because you can't get Antonelli and Russell in if you do that side of things?
That's the thing. So running the constructor makes it really hard to run the Mercedes drivers, but you can see a 6 million gap between Mercedes and Ferrari. Only 3 points predicted between the two of them. That's with Antonelli putting up potentially a bombshell of a week. A lot of that with Ferrari, not only are they predicted to get potentially one, if not two podium finishes in this race, it's the pit stop points. They had over 200 over the balance of last year, 9+ points per race just from pit stops. So if they can get the fastest pit stop of the day in a 5-point pit stop, that's 15 points clear of Mercedes, even if they have the race winner.
What other chats do we miss?
Oh, I'm sure we missed a ton.
We missed a ton. Everyone could fly out the gate, didn't they?
So another big question I'm seeing is anyone planning on using the autopilot chip? Now you have quite possibly a surefire race winner in George Russell. Antonelli, if he comes back through the pack and gets driver of the day and gets all these overtakes, that's a humongous week for him too. So then who gets the 2x boost? For me, it looks like Antonelli, even on a very optimistic return up through the grid, is only projected to get 2-ish points more than Russell. So I'd be okay starting with it on Russell. It hedges in case Antonelli doesn't get all the way back up to where we think he'll get. And you save autopilot for a rainy day, literally or figuratively.
Yeah, no, I mean, to be honest, autopilot hasn't even come into my thinking. And I don't know if that's naive or not. I just haven't looked at it as if I think there's more occasions during the course of the season where autopilot's going to come in handy. I think this is going to be hugely unpredictable. We're seeing engine reliability creep in as these engines are turned up. I think Rick messaged me yesterday and said about the engine reliability. And I said, the interesting thing for me is as soon as we've turned these engines up and we've put them into race/qualifying trim, we're starting to see some gremlins creep in. We saw Red Bull had some issues with theirs. We've seen, Williams having issues with theirs. It seems like the moment we start putting load through them, as in true race load, because even in testing, they're mapped down, they're deliberately run fixes. We heard that the Mercedes customers didn't quite get the full Mercedes engine package deliberately. We know Mercedes have been looking at final stuff with, the engine compression, what they're doing with that, and also making sure that they were compliant with the FIA. So I think that the first race, with all of this mapping, all of this battery, all of this thing, could throw up a few surprises. So whilst autopilot's on there, and someone said about no negative as well, which I'm sure is going to come into it. It feels like with the weather and everything else, there's a better opportunity to use no negative, even though we've got these big question marks on everything else.
A good point you made there, Terry, about some of that reliability. The latest betting lines on race finishers is right around 17.5. So if you assume 2 Aston Martins are gone, that's 2 to 3 other drivers retiring at some point. Pretty decent likelihood of Perez. Actually, you can filter these sims by it. Pretty darn good chance of Aston Martins retiring, and then about a 1 in 3 chance of your Cadillacs. So that could be the retiring cars there.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at 90% of a DNF for Aston Martin. I think that's being generous, if I'm honest.
They haven't run for more than 10 minutes all weekend, so that's certainly something.
I mean, I've got better batteries in my Duracell torch than what they've got in that car at the moment. He's absolutely shot. 90%. That is absolutely crazy.
That's outrageous.
This one's interesting because I've got this one in my team. So I haven't got him in my main team, and I've gone with 2 big constructors in Mercedes and Ferrari, just to give people a bit of a tease on that one. And someone else put in the chat, don't know if that's in preferred 2 B tier constructors if Kimi starts on pit lane. What are your thoughts on drivers and constructors, Adam? I mean, start of the season is all about budget building. So if you're new, this is one thing which I learned very much last year is about building your budget rather than going for the best team you're going to win. Because if you're new to the game, your instant thing is I'm going to pick a team and I'm going to go for who I think is going to finish the best, isn't it? That's your natural default in fantasy. If you're a new player, you're going to go, here's my team. I'm going to look at the results. I'm going to look at all the qualifying. I'm going to look at all the data and go, right, who's going to finish the higher? But it's not about that, especially at the start of the season, is it? So I think if you're new and if you're in the chat or even maybe if you're an existing player, that budget building in the first few weeks is really crucial to building your team up. Otherwise, the end of the season, you're going to be in trouble.
So how I'm planning to do it this week is to stagger one tier A and one tier B constructor. Hope that tier B constructor gets me my cost cap gain. What that allows me to do is then run 2 tier A drivers at the top of my lineup. And then we've got a lot of dice rolls in the middle of the grid that could lose value this week. So by running a tier B constructor, I only have to run 3 tier B drivers. And so that's one less volatile asset on my team. I'm hoping I get lucky and all 3 of them survive the race. They don't go down in price too much. I only get 0.2 million drops instead of 0.6 million drops. And then I can roll into China with a team that I can nudge into something a little bit better. Whereas with a 2 tier A constructor build like what Terry has, you're going to have 4 drivers that you're rolling the dice with, but a much higher points floor with Mercedes and Ferrari. You're going to get, according to these sims, upwards of 130 points just from your constructor. So a lot to look forward to there, but you just got to keep your fingers and toes crossed that everyone survives that you put on your team.
But the advantage this year isn't one of the rule changes that any team wins. So previous years, you've had only your team win is in the prize competition, isn't it? So before you had to really focus on your first team and you had to focus on it. But this year, with the rule changes, you're allowed 3 teams. You can actually play about with lineups a bit more and still be in a chance of winning prizes. Surely that's a good positive thing from the game this year.
Yes. We've made some friends with some of the podium finishers that weren't able to win a prize because they were team 3s last year. So they were very relieved to see that those rules have changed. I see producer Greg post in the chat about our featured league. If you haven't joined it yet, we're approaching 20,000 teams, and this is a great partnership we have with Formula One. So if you want to tell the pinnacle of motorsport that the fantasy diehards want to have more representation of the game, join this league. Let's be nice and loud about it.
Yeah, we've got better photos this year, so join just on that basis.
I want to show you the betting lines because we have a lot of pieces of data that we could use to predict how things are going to go this week. But I have never seen a driver with a betting line more certain of a victory than George Russell at plus 100. Not at the height of Lando's stardom last year did he get this high of a betting line for the week. So I think George is a pretty good lock for the race win unless something really crazy befalls him. Ferrari right after him, displacing Max Verstappen, who had been the consensus P2 in the offseason. You could see the McLaren drivers, even though Oscar stood out in FP2, he's still all the way down here in P5. So they're clearly Vegas is seeing something in the long run data from McLaren that it doesn't like because Lando's seated just past him. The Antonelli pick here in P6, I think, is it assuming that they either get a car out there and he slaps it into Q3 and is at least competitive. I can't imagine he would get from the pit lane to P6 because that would be a 45, 50 point week in fantasy with driver of the day. So that would be ambitious, but my goodness, if P6 is the ceiling for Antonelli starting in the pit lane, he is a must have this week.
Absolutely. In terms of obviously McLaren, Oscar Piastri, if he gets to the podium, potentially gets a win, what does that do for driver of the day? I mean, we've foolishly over many a race sat here and tried to predict driver of the day. And the world of Formula One and the fan base decides to, give someone like Valtteri Bottas a returning hero driver of the day award. So it's always a bone of contention in the world of fantasy Formula One. But do we think that an Oscar Piastri podium or an Oscar Piastri, race win or something like that, does that put him into driver of the day? The extra points for that one, what does that do for a potential Oscar Piastri in there? So I suppose what I'm trying to say is, what if Oscar gets on the podium and gets driver of the day? Would that make him more of an asset than a surefire George Russell, who's going to get pole, lead from the front, stay at the front, and then win the race?
Well, it's 15 points for third place, 25 points for first place, and then 10 for driver of the day. So that'd put them pretty even. Then the difference is things like their qualifying position. George will get a few points, potentially overtakes. Oscar could have a few of those. So then they basically come out in the wash if that happens. And Australian drivers have been doomed at this race. You think about Oscar going off into the wet
Yeah.
grass last year, Daniel Ricciardo's history, Mark Webber's history. So a podium for Oscar, I think, would turn the tide on driver of the day, but I'm still not quite sure considering you can afford the likes of George and Charles Leclerc, George and Kimi Antonelli. It's just too tasty for me at this point.
Look, so I'm starting some off with Bottas driver of the day now. Look, if Bottas is driver of the day, we'll have to clip that because that's.
We started the week thinking he'd be such a good asset on our team because we thought he'd be serving a race penalty, and they announced less than 24 hours ago that they've updated the sporting regulations, and now he doesn't have to serve the penalty anymore. So now he's just marooned in the back.
I've got a bonus contention because there is an update to the sporting regulations. Someone's clearly just taken that away because ultimately there was no update. The clarification on that was clear at the time. I have no idea. The FIA have kept completely quiet. They've not even talked about it. It's just vanished overnight. It feels like it's one of those ones where they've gone, it feels harsh to punish a driver who hasn't been on a grid for 12 months, a new team coming in, etc. Because ultimately, I can't see where it got changed because no regulations were talked about. They clarified at the time saying it was still going to be served. And then it's conveniently in a press conference disappeared after Valtteri himself talked about it with F1, if I remember rightly, on one of his social media videos before that. So quite an interesting one for me.
I've never seen something like that before.
There's something as well with straight modes. Did you see that overnight?
Yeah, it sounds like they're eliminating a straight zone because it might have been a little dangerous.
Yeah, but that's because of the teams. The teams kicked back at the FIA. So the FIA wanted to do something on one of them, and they faced absolute uproar from the teams and put it back in.
Ooh.
So it's a real bone of contention. They wanted to change it due to safety, and then they put it back in because the teams went to town with them and talk about engine mapping, talk about what data they've already run. Changing the straight line now is going to be detrimental to them, and the FIA pull it back in. We've heard this that they can actually change the amount of power and the straight line speeds and the amount of boost you get. So they can almost manipulate what the racing's doing, which is something I don't think it's talked about quite a lot or even sort of noticed, because for me, it's a really weird setup to know that they could meddle with it in the sense of what power they're giving the cars. It kind of feels wrong, if I'm honest, from a racing purist point of view, that we've got the FIA saying, oh, we're going to limit what power you get, what extra boost you get. And it feels like it's a bone of contention straight away, to be honest.
It's weird that they're making a lot of changes this late in the race week.
Yeah.
It definitely impacts your planning and just how the teams are approaching this weekend. So definitely a lot of fixes to make on the fly. I want to jump into some of our member lineups. We could knock those out. But if you wanted to get to some of the chat member lineups and reveal our lineups, make sure you hit that like button because we're going to hold out until we get to our target of, what do we think, 100? 200?
No, 2.
Fantastic. Let's try it. Let's give it a shot. Terry, in the meantime, I'm going to blast through Race Maven's lineup. Could you take a look and see if there's any news on Kimi?
I'm literally just doing that. Apologies if you see me glancing down at my phone. I'm trying
So Race Maven says, glad you're back for another season. Race Maven, I'm glad you're back for another season.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your support as well. Really appreciate it.
So it looks like your options here are Antonelli Verstappen, Antonelli Lewis, who the chat has been saying we've been sleeping on, and then Lewis double premium constructor. I like... Ooh, let's see if we lean back a little bit. I think I like this middle team a little bit better because I trust VCarb and Mercedes Mercedes to outscore Ferrari and VCarb to outscore Audi. And then, believe it or not, right now, I think Lewis is on pace to do a little bit better than Max this week. Max was complaining about a number of things in FP3 and feels a little bit out of sorts. So this might be the time to avoid him.
This is Max. When you can tell we're back when Max is complaining, and how many times have we seen this with Max? And
then he sticks it on pole.
And then he sticks on pole. Absolutely. And that's the thing with Max, is that Max would always find something to talk about. He would always find something. He's a perfectionist, isn't he? So whilst Max complaining isn't actually a barometer a lot of time. And we also know Red Bull like to sandbag during practice session. It's something they did before. It's something I can imagine they're doing even more with their own engine. The question is how much they're sandbagging on it. Because if they can get Max into some bone of contention and into the mix, Then you've then got the Max drivers. We talked about beginning of the week, didn't we? We talked about that is Red Bull a sleeping asset? Isaac Hadjar. It's all I don't know. I've got to see with a double Red Bull lineup in. Can I just say? Is it a difference in there?
Of course you do. All right, so Rick, I hear you are now, we are no longer checking. So let me know if this isn't you, Rick, but I think it is you. Running 3 teams this season, and which one would I say is the strongest? Now, you would warn me that you're going to look into a lot of Hamilton.
So a lot of red on that one.
A lot of red on this one. So I gotta lean back and think about this a bit. Triple Audi, you are a madman, Rick.
Hello, Rick. Rick's in the chat as well. That is Rick, by the way.
Oh, good.
He's just said.
You know, anything that gets me a piece of George Russell, I think I'd be good with this last team, and I hope I could convince you to run either autopilot or swap that 2X over to George, because I think he's going to really run away with this one.
Do you think we're sleeping on Lewis Hamilton?
Sleeping compared to where he always is, which is a little bit overpriced for what we get. I think he's an incredible value this year, but not sleeping in the sense of I don't think he's going to outscore Russell.
He's really interesting. He looks very calm. He looks very relaxed. That's normally a really good sign with Lewis, to be honest. When he looks like he's very open in media. He's looking confident, and all we're seeing is more and more confidence. So I think for me, he's one where he might actually surprise people. Tends to qualify a lot lower than Charles Leclerc. I don't think that's a bad thing to say, in the sense of Lewis tends to qualify further back. We've seen his qualifying pace has been quite poor over the past few years. It's something that comes from Mercedes. Used to be a strong point, but actually recently it's not been his strongest point. But his racecraft has normally shone through. We saw that quite a few times, haven't we, where he's qualified low and come back. And again, it makes you wonder with that Ferrari start, going back, could we see a Lewis qualifying lower and then coming back through the pack? Top 4, someone's just put in all 4 sessions. When was the last time that happened for Lewis? You're in the fan. Go on, Adam.
Well, you know what jumped in my head first is that Lewis has, I think, the most pole positions ever at Albert Park, but not a huge collection of wins because he always has that little thing that upsets his afternoon. So hopefully he can bust out of that streak, because I'm a Lewis guy. I want to see this work out for him for sure. I just noticed one of our earlier polls, 2X driver pick, 64% have gone with George Russell, 22% with Leclerc, 7% want the homeboy Oscar Piastri. 6% said someone else, which I imagine is Rick or someone that is going with Kimi. Just want to check and make sure we have no other lineups. All right, we'll come back over here while we wait for any more to come in.
Let's cover some of this chat off. Lots of questions. Let's talk questions.
All right. Trenton says, I'm using Lindblad, Hulkenberg, Bortoletto, Colapinto, Bottas, Lawson for my cheapies. Fantastic. That's pretty much what our bank of cheap drivers is at this point.
Oh, Reckless Medic is clearly doing loads of options on there. Look, what have they changed it to now?
You know, that team's not half bad, this new one. Ferrari, V-Carb, Russell, Antonelli, Behrman, Lindblad, Colapinto. Yeah, no problems at all there.
That's a good one. Bortoletto or Hulkenberg? Ooh.
This is a me thing. I love the Hulkenberg track record at Australia. He's finished exactly P7, 6 out of his last 8 races there. He's finished in the top 11. If you'll give me top 11, 9 straight. So this is across teams. This is across regulations, dry races, wet races. So Hulkenberg seems to always find a way. So if I'm in between those two, give me Hulkenberg as the Cadillac if you can afford him. I know a lot of us are in a budget situation where we can only run Gabby, which is forgivable too.
Just here's some of these.
I see Gavin in the chat. If anybody doesn't know Gavin, he finished on the podium last year, and he's joining us here. Gavin, a lot of questions in the chat about Kimi Antonelli, and is he worth a start with a potential back of the grid start tomorrow?
So Craig's put avoiding all Aston Williams, Cadillac, and Alpine assets, at least for race 1, and 2 shots through DNF. I think the problem is you kind of got to go with an Alpine Cadillac asset, haven't you, with some of these lineups? And it is very much a lucky dip of which one you pick in terms of who's going in there, isn't it? Wow, this one is. Listen to this one. Me and my friends are doing a fantasy league where we set our teams now and do not touch them for the rest of the season. Sounds like me a few years ago. For just one of our teams, which drivers and constructors do you think is best for that? Wow. I would put Mercedes and Ferrari mixed in there somewhere, either via your drivers or your teams, definitely.
It's the only scenario where I'd say you should probably do the double tier A constructor now, because we'll get there soon. But maybe you got to do the one tier A driver like a Leclerc, Ferrari, Mercedes now, and then just let it coast off into the sunset, and then hope that a Lindblad or a Bortoletto, they start aging really well at the end of the year and make up those cost cap gains and start building your team for you.
Right. We got a couple of questions on chips as well, which I just want to cover off. Can you use Final Fix today?
No. This is a good question that's come up a few times. There are 3 chips you only get after you complete one race week. Final Fix is one of them. So a lot of people trying to stem off the Kimi -5 if he doesn't participate in qualifying, you're stuck with it. No Final Fix.
And then someone else has just put, sorry if I've just missed you. Hey guys, first time playing coming from Football Fantasy. Is times 3 boost a good idea? If not, when do you play it? Now, normally we say hold out for a sprint weekend, don't we? Because there's more points involved. In the sense of when you use your times 3, you obviously triple the amount of points. You get your times 2 points as well. So realistically, we normally think that actually it's going to be a case of save it for a sprint weekend rather than the weekend like this weekend, for example, is probably the general advice.
I would definitely hold on the 3x boost. Wait till a little bit later in the season. We have a whole video on this where it is going to be a little bit strange in 2026 because the sprint calendar ends earlier than it did last year. Will we have the budget gained up to run 2 tier A drivers and 2 tier A constructors? It's uncertain. And if we do we really run it at Singapore because there's been some wet weather, big crashes, it's a street circuit. So it's going to be a weird year for that chip, but I would hold it this week and not run it. Great point I just noticed on X from Andrew. Andrew won the Global League 2 years ago. You might know him as Leapsfrog. He says if Antonelli doesn't qualify, it changes the map on who sneaks into Q3. That's one spot in Q3 for a Haas, for a Racing Bulls, for maybe a Pierre Gasly or an Alex Albon if something crazy happens to sneak into Q3. That could help that tier B construct that we're trying to sneak in for the extra points. Remember, their cost cap gain threshold is only 8-9 points, and getting both drivers into Q2, getting one driver into Q3, that's going to get you most of the way there before the Grand Prix even starts.
Okay, so Trevor's managed to get us a share of what's happening with Kimi Antonelli. So a Mercedes spokesman told Sky Sports the chassis and the power unit look okay on close inspection, so they're now working hard to get his car ready. No guarantee it's going to be ready in time, as there's a lot of work to do. So
now, I'd say if you have Kimi on your team, you're keeping your fingers crossed that you eat the 5-point penalty and he starts from the pit lane tomorrow. I don't think you'd want that Mercedes to limp out. If he hasn't optimized that exact car, I figure he might fall back a little bit, and maybe you'd prefer a Russell Leclerc at that point. So this could be a last-second move for us. If they get Kimi on the track, I think that's the difference between me running Leclerc versus taking my chance with Antonelli.
It's always hard, isn't it? Because when they're rushing, this is where it leaves that element of, is something connected right? Is something not quite right? Is there something in there where actually, we made a mistake? These people are under pressure. It's extremely high profile. It's extremely tough what they're going to do. And you're right. Sometimes you wonder if it's just better to just say, do you know what? We're not going to make it. We're going to use one of our jokers and break the curfew. I don't know if the curfew rule actually applies to qualifying. Now, beginning of the week, the curfew rule was lifted because of all of the travel coming to Australia. So we saw that the curfew was lifted by the FIA for the start of the week. But what I didn't see is if that carries on all the way through the weekend, which is something I've only just thought about, actually. So obviously, normally, I mean, you can break curfew anyway. That's not a problem. You can break it, 3 times in the season anyway. So it's not a major problem to break the curfew. But I'm just thinking in my head now, I remember seeing that the FIA lifted it due to all the travel with the teams. But actually, did they lift it for the whole weekend or did they lift it for the start of the weekend? I don't know. I might have to check that one. But anyway, I think that from that point of view, I think they should start getting it right over the course of the rest of the day.
Terry, I'm going to go over to X now. Have you posted your team yet?
I should post it literally now. If you give me a second.
All right, I'm gonna hold on right here until we get that up. Let's see if we can reveal the first of our teams. But if you want to see mine, I want to see more likes. Not even at 75 yet, and I've got a juicy one. So let's see those likes.
Right, I'm just posting, so please refresh.
All right, we are checking.
We are checking. There's one for Rick there.
Oh, look at this. The Terry special, going for Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes, and Ferrari, and then just a big dice roll with the four of the cheapest drivers on the grid, just hoping they survive the race, gets them to China. This team could be quite good in China because we want to Tier A constructors if we can get into them for a sprint weekend because of those extra points.
Yeah, so obviously for the first time, I'm actually running more than one team. Can we just appreciate that fact? I normally don't bother, to be honest, because my whole feature last year was if any one team can win, I'm just going to run one team and I'm just going to roll my dice for it and do that. And to be honest, it didn't serve me too bad last year. Running 3 teams absolutely confuses the hell out of me. I ain't gonna lie. You know, it's like really? Yeah, it's bad enough trying to lock in one lineup, let alone lock in 3 of these lineups.
The key is you just have to keep all these different strategies in your head. If one doesn't work, you could run a Russell Leclerc team, a Russell Antonelli team, a Lewis Antonelli team, and just see where it all goes.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to look at some of these points.
I'm having a good long stare at some of these best teams just to make sure before I lock in my lineup that nothing crazy is happening. But Terry, let me know if you hear anything about Kimi.
I will do. I'm just seeing it. So team 1, Russell Leclerc, Bortoleto, Lindblad, Lawson, Ferrari, Haas, or team 2, Leclerc, Piastri, Behrman, Hulk, Lawson, Ferrari, Haas.
I think I'd prefer a Russell team. I don't quite trust. For some reason, my gut doesn't trust Piastri right now because when we look back at it's the betting lines that sway me. The pace looks so good in FP2, but he's all the way down here. So something is missing from that McLaren.
Yeah,
Vegas knows better than us.
Yeah, I'll go team 1. Any thoughts on Lindblad having their first race rookie jitters, possible DNF? He looks confident. I've been really impressed with him. I mean, Red Bull have waited a long time to get Arvid in a car. And let's be honest, it was Red Bull who pushed for the age limit to be lowered with dispensation. It wasn't Mercedes putting Kimi in. It was actually Red Bull pushing under, obviously, Christian Helmet when they were there to try and get Arvid actually in a car. So Red Bull have had there for a while in terms of getting Arvid into Formula 1. He does look calm. He looks composed. Yes, there's going to be nerves. But from what I'm seeing so far, I think that his mindset and his personality strike me as someone who's going to be okay, to be honest. But we obviously saw what happened with Isaac last year, and obviously what happened with some of the more established drivers with the weather and things. I know we haven't got that element this year, but we saw the rookies last year. I think it's worth a gamble. From a
if it was a wet race, I'd stay away from a rookie at this circuit because it took out so many drivers last year. I'm fine with him this year. I think his biggest enemy would be if there was any reliability issues. But like you mentioned earlier, Terry, that Ford powertrain, I feel pretty good about it. Shouldn't be a big issue. It's just a matter now of does he overqualify and then drop in the Grand Prix? That would be another scenario where he loses a few points, but that's a 0.6 million price drop. So we've got to be careful.
And I like this question about Audi. So can we talk a bit more about Audi? Great performances across P1 and P3. Makes think they might be better positioned than Haas. Now, obviously, no other customer team to compare to, so really difficult in terms of power unit and in terms of obviously what they've got. So obviously, with some of the other teams, when they're a customer supply team, we can kind of get an idea of how strong the engine is. Audi are their own thing. Jonathan Wheatley and Binotto have done a really good job there, to be honest. Really impressed quite a few people. Quite aggressive in designing the car as well. Brought some upgrades. First team on track in a new regulation era. These regulations were written for Audi. They were there for it in terms of electrification. We know that it was designed to bring Audi into the sport. Is that an advantage that people aren't really sort of sitting on or really realizing? Because these set of rules were written for Audi and Ford to come back, weren't they? The two big suppliers who were coaxed by having this 50% electrification were those two to bring them to the sport. So you kind of sit here and think they must have known that they had a good idea what engine to build to push for those regulation changes.
And you can see here in the Sims, they're only 5 points behind the likes of VCarb, Haas, and some of the other Tier B constructors that we have here. So I think that's just a matter of maybe one of these drivers getting into Q3, sneaking in with Kimi potentially not participating in qualifying, or a little bit more race pace, or this could also too be the odds of DNF. And this is still ranked for highest odds of DNF. You can see the 2 Audis are after the 2 Cadillacs and the 2 Aston Martins. So maybe a little concern about reliability failure, but again, somewhere between 15 to 18 is where most of the back of the grid normally are on a regular race week. All right.
Harvey doesn't agree. I think if you look at just Stefano's comments yesterday, Harvey, where he said these rules were written for enticing both Audi and Ford back to the sport, or certainly Ford back to the sport and Audi into the sport, he might disagree, but everyone's got an opinion.
I've got plenty. That's for sure. And, you know, one thing we didn't show earlier was the qualifying sim pace from F1.com. One of the things that was interesting here is where this midfield shakes out, the Racing Bulls, Haas, Audi, Williams in the qualifying sim versus down here. Haas pop up a little bit, Alpine pop way up, and then Racing Bulls and Audi come down. That makes me a tiny bit nervous, but also you have to have some Racing Bulls and Audi coverage on your team. There's just not a way around it in this first race. So I think you're just going to have to throw a dart at the board, hope it's a bullseye.
I'm intrigued to know where they got that McLaren race pace from.
You know, so we had Lawrence on the show 2 years ago, and he said sometimes these simulations do have a bit of previous year bias in them. I would argue that last year was a very different year because of the regulation change. So that's what I think McLaren is, because the betting lines have them in such a different state than the qualifying and race sims that you see here that have them both P1. That feels ambitious. Question in the chat. Can I know your opinion on Ferrari V-Carb, Ferrari V-Carb, Ferrari Audi, and Ferrari Haas? This is genuinely a toss-up. I think we all agree that Ferrari's probably the best way to go because how much cheaper they are than the likes of Mercedes. Then it's a matter of who do you trust more. I like V-Carb and Haas slightly more, but you can see the chat has been blowing up about Audi because their free practice formulas look quite good. The question's going to be reliability and can they last the whole race distance, which isn't certain yet, but could be just fine. So I would say, for me, it's very close. V-Carb, Haas, Audi in that order.
What about this one? Russell, 2 times driver, Leclerc, Bortoleto, Lindblad, Lawson, Ferrari, and Haas. I think that's a strong partnership. Gets you a mix of George, gets you Ferrari in there as well. Haas, so gets you that Ferrari power unit in terms of that sense as well. I think,
and I'd say if you find out in the next 15 minutes that Antonelli's good, they're going to limp that car out on track for Q1, I might switch to a Russell Leclerc lineup to give you a bit of a hint on where I am right now. Good question, Carlos. Autopilot, if I have Russell, Leclerc, Hamilton, Behrman. When you're throwing 3 good drivers at the top like that, not a crazy shout. No. I think Russell should outperform the 2 of them, but when you have 3 good drivers like that, it would be a fine play if you did it. Oh, no problem, Alexandra. You like that we have a space where we can talk about our F1 passion. Yeah, we like to nerd out about F1 fantasy here. So
absolutely
happy to nerd out with you.
How about running no chips? Is that a bad thing? No, I'm not running any chips. So
I'm not running any chips either.
No. So
and part of this comes from the fact that we could get this very wrong. There's a lot of ways we could get this very wrong. And so if we don't run any chips this week, we have the option of the wild card to get it right before our first sprint in China next weekend. Whereas if you run autopilot, no negative, 3x boost, something like that this week, and you get it wrong, then that's 2 of your 6 chips gone in an 8-day period. So for me, I'm just going to grin and bear it this week, no matter what happens, with the opportunity to take wild card on next week if I get it totally wrong.
And so that's what's happened to Zach. We should answer Zach. So Zach obviously decided to focus on his own channel, which is really great for him. So whilst we will miss you, Zach, according to Jack always said, we obviously wish him all the best because he's absolutely great guy. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, awesome guy. I wish him totally well. It was a real pleasure working with him. So all the best to him in his
Absolutely.
channel. All right, Terry, I've done it.
Oh,
Locked it in. Now, we have unlimited free transfers, so this could change, and y'all be here if it changes. But let's move over. I'm doing it. It looks like this.
Ooh, see if I've got loads of relatives.
Russell, like we talked about, I think he's going to run away with this race. I think 35 points is on the table times 2. Antonelli could become Leclerc if they get that car up for qualifying, because I like Leclerc better than Antonelli starting the whole race amongst the grid. Ferrari constructor is nice and cheap compared to Mercedes. Great pit stop points. I like what Racing Bulls can bring in terms of getting a driver into Q3. Both drivers into Q2 seems like a lock. I didn't want triple Racing Bulls, so I'm not too thrilled about Behrman Colapinto, but I couldn't think of a better lineup that has more upside than Behrman, and hopefully Colapinto stays out of the way.
Absolutely. I quite like it. I've got one quite similar in my team 3 where I've got Russell, Antonelli, Behrman, Lindblad, Colapinto, and then Ferrari Racing Bulls. So very, very similar, to be honest.
Yeah.
In one of my other ones. So that's covered off the bets on that one. Did I see, is anyone rocking with Kimi in their draft? Adam's not rocking with Kimi in his drafts. He's rocking with him in his lineup. And never on the drafts, absolutely rocking in there.
I was inspired by Ryder. Let's come over to the points here. I'm going to rank them top to bottom one more time so you can see it. He's projecting a pit lane start and a big week. So let's move all the way over. That would be a really high likelihood of driver of the day. Lots of overtakes there. If he finishes even P6, P7 at this point, that's a big afternoon. So looking at Antonelli, pretty strong right now, assuming Mercedes don't get him out on track. Rick, I think, has been burnt by Franco Colapinto a few too many times. For me, my Alpine that has doomed me is Pierre Gasly. He's in timeout for a while.
It is. To be honest, when I put him in that team, it was purely on a budget basis. R and Cookie, could I just give a shout out to them, because they're clearly watching fantasy deadline streamers as I watch the live feed, because they've got all the individual channels on, basically split screen on phone, iPad, to support everybody. So one, a huge thank you for supporting. Absolutely agree with you. So many great content creators out there, so many great fantasy people out there, all going live. It reminds me of how I watch a race with about 10 screens, if I'm honest. So absolutely nothing wrong with that at all.
All right. If you have any other questions, lineups you want us to review, throw them in the comments right now. Terry and I are going to lightning round for the next 13 minutes. Make sure everybody's lineups are set. We have unlimited free transfers, so you can lock it and then be persuaded by the group. Have a little group think to nudge your team into something else.
Yeah, and if we have missed you, please drop it back in. And sometimes the chat is a bit faster when you look at the screen. So please, if we have missed you and you've got a burning question, put it back in. And what did I say? Budget on the table. Now, it's not bad leaving budget on the table. Someone asked that question. So don't be fooled into thinking you've got to spend your budget at all. It's one of those things, if you're new to the game, you might have to get your head around a bit. Sometimes it's better to not actually wait and spend all your budget if you get a better asset with a price increase on it. So don't be worried if you've got a lineup that you like and it's looking good and it's leaving sometimes even a couple of million on the table. It can happen, certainly as the season goes on, that's for sure.
Rick is saying screens are still covering Antonelli's car.
They will do.
Canal Plus reporting it is not ruled out that they'll get the car out. Because keep in mind, we can start the session and he's in the garage. Then they have whatever it is, 18 or so minutes to get him out there. He needs one warm-up lap and then one hot lap, and he's easily going to pass 6 cars. So
yeah,
it's still there.
That's what I mean. It's not beyond the realms of it. I mean, your gearbox and your engine is the main thing. If you save those, bodywork is one that suspension is probably the only other big one, I'll say, with that. He really made a mess of that suspension. So that's probably the biggest challenge, I'd say, if your engine and gearbox is fine. So qualifying is literally in about 10 minutes or so.
So Greg just posted in the chat the lineup I would probably pivot to, or something close to it, if they can get Kimi out there. It's Leclerc, Russell, Ferrari, V-Carb. If they get Kimi out there in a mostly new car, I'd probably prefer Leclerc slightly, because all those overtakes, the driver of the day potential goes down. I think Charles is a better shout. He's been consistent all through the free practice sessions.
David, who are you going for in terms of your constructors? Just look at that one. So he's got Piastri, Leclerc, Behrman, Hulkenberg, Lindblad.
Good start.
It's good start.
I'd take Leclerc as the 2X driver over Piastri, just because there's something missing on that race pace of the McLaren. I assume David's going to do something like a Ferrari Haas, Ferrari Racing Bulls. with those two elite drivers up there?
Oh, top three quality predictions. I think George Russell's going to put it on pole, if I'm honest, looking at it. And then I think we might even see both Ferraris behind him. Is what I'm leaning towards currently. From the off.
I'll say George, Charles, a shocker from Max, just to be a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I would say George Russell looks extremely strong at the moment. That was a real big banker lap that you put in FP3.
Yeah, I almost woke the kids with the scream I screamed when I saw him go up 7/10 on Leclerc. That's the pace we've been talking about for months. They've been, I think, maybe hiding it. Hopefully it's something that's consistent, doesn't lead to a reliability issue.
I think they've been hiding it. I think they're basically, for me, they've definitely been hiding it. They've been waiting to see what happens with this engine regulation. They've been waiting to see how long they got an advantage for, how long it's locked in for. I remember a couple of years back with Christian Horner when he talked about, remember when Red Bull come out the gate and they were dominant, and Christian said we turned the cars down because we were actually that dominant at the time. We didn't want the FIA to know just how fast we were. It reminds me of that, and it certainly has done in pre-season. We've all been sat here thinking, where's this extra Mercedes power that everyone's been worried about, talking about, and I think we're starting to see it now. Max might put a rubber out of the hat. You can never count Max out. That's why he's in one of my teams, because I just feel Max is Max, and if you've got a car and it's half decent, then what do you do? Hakon's just woke up. What do you do? Pick a team up. Look, he did.
So in case you've missed it, Antonelli crashed hard in practice 3. We're trying to figure out if he's going to start qualifying. If he doesn't start qualifying, he doesn't post a representative time, he could start from the pit lane on Sunday. F1 Fantasy Tools saying huge overtake potential and driver of the day. If they roll his car out there, I like Leclerc a little bit more. I'm going Russell, Leclerc, Ferrari, V-Carb. Terry going with a Hamilton, Ferrari, Mercedes double tier A constructor. Sebastian, do we use any chip? I'm not. Depending on which two top drivers you have, you could use something like an autopilot. But for me, I think there's such a good chance of me using wildcard for China just to be totally right before that sprint. I don't want to use chips in back-to-back weeks, and this could be a very long stretch of the season after
that. So Kimi Antonelli's car's been fitted, gearbox rear wing's been fitted, but they're still working on the front suspension and other areas is the latest update.
Giving you a little flash of where I am now as things stand.
So it looks like 3/4 of the car is complete. It's the best way to describe it. I mean, shout out to the mechanics. It amazes me how they can put a car back together. I mean, that is monumental. Even if they don't get that car out, that's an absolutely monumental effort by the Mercedes crew.
Because that was a disaster.
Yeah.
And the session started 15 minutes late because there was a huge incident in Formula 3.
Yeah.
And then they damaged the barrier, then they had to clean it up. So the timing of the session was later. The time to fix the incident was shorter. So kudos to Mercedes if they can get this right. Geslick wants to see Terry's lineup. Let me come back to Terry.
Yeah, one of them, yeah.
Ta-da. Hamilton, Mercedes, Ferrari. Big roll of the dice in the middle.
Yeah.
I like it though, because if this hits, it's huge news for you heading into China, because you could roll most of this team all the way through. I want to get into something like this for next week if the cost cap gains work for me.
Yeah, I mean, that was my thinking, is where I go with it in China. Future thinking, that's something I never did last year as well. So welcome to the rule.
Happy days.
Happy days. So yeah, we've only a couple of transfers. I was thinking, actually, what do I move from? So I think, yeah, you look at Ferrari looked quite good in the sprint last year in China as well, as we know. So I'm kind of hoping that form might continue going into it.
So Lucas is stressing, and let me make your mind a little bit more at ease here. I talked to some of the top 10 players in the world from last year, and they absolutely butchered Australia and still finish in the top 10. So the goal is to just get yourself as close in a position as possible to get decent points. Even if you mess it all up, we'll wild card into something decent for China, and then your season starts from there. So don't be too nervous. Give yourself the best chance of succeeding this week. A little bit of a balance of points and cost cap based on where your gut and some of the data we've shown you in the last hour will tell you. And then we'll take it from there next week.
Why not Borsetto instead of Lawson? I don't know.
For Terry? Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, it depends. The pace is there. If he can get it up into Q3 and then a differential tire strategy, he can stay up there. So it's not crazy about Bortoletto. And also has
Yeah.
Lawson given us any reason to feel like he's a sure thing there. I think they're all a bit of a gamble no matter how you slice it. V-carb over Haas, Alexandra. I did it because I get that extra million, then I can run Behrman, get the
Yeah.
coverage of my favorite Haas there. The reverse would be Haas down here. You get Behrman through the constructor, and then this would be a downgraded driver.
Tim wants to know why not 2 times Leclerc with his consistency versus one burst lap of Mercedes.
I would say if someone told me right now that Kimmy's starting qualifying, I would probably put Leclerc in now, keep the 2x on Russell. Because again, looking back at the betting lines, it's such a very likely chance that he runs away with this one. This is the best betting line I've ever seen for someone to be a shoe-in to win the race.
That's
That's
what I'm
what I
going
like.
to do.
That's right where he wants you.
Absolutely. You know, I'm off to the Vegas betting lines in a minute because
Let Terry into Vegas once, and now he's a gambling man.
that's it.
Rick, it's good to see you too. Good luck this week. Terry, anything else on Kimmy?
No, all I'm saying is
Come
that
back in here.
they're literally they've got the rear end of the car built, so they're still working on it. So Tim's got a good point. Russell did crash in turn 5. We all remember that dance with Fernando Alonso, and that got a bit of weight from him, even though Fernando was half a lap behind him. Opinion on running triple Haas, it feels a bit risky. It's not the end of the world, Haas, to be honest, but it does feel like maybe one of them might not be finishing the race, and I think that's probably where the doubts are with running triple Haas. But I think in terms of what it frees up in budget, they're all good assets on that one.
There's pros and cons to it because I love Haas and a high overtake circuit in China next week. So if you can just survive this week, that's a great 3-piece asset to move into next week. But you got to hope they survive this week. And that means you're spending a little bit more on those assets with Behrman and Haas compared to the V-carb guys. So you might be sacrificing on those top 2 tier A drivers. So I would just be cautious at the points impact of having triple Haas this week.
I want to just quickly touch on Craig's comment because there is something quite interesting. So about overtaking with the new cars before there is new rules on overtaking this year as well with the stewards, which could see less penalties, which might be advantageous in terms of fantasy Formula 1, because there is more leniency towards the stewards in terms of how they deliberate what a corner is, what an apex is, what the drivers do. So hopefully that might make for a bit better racing, a bit more overtaking. It does give a bit more leniency in terms of lockups, where we saw obviously Piastri in Brazil getting penalised for it. It's kind of taken away some of those, which I think, even though it shouldn't be a factor, might just play a factor in terms of drivers thinking. It feels it's more suited to the drivers, to be honest. And I think we're almost up, aren't we? That's my Twitter alert telling me that qualifying is about to start, literally.
I've got one more thing I want to share. If producer Greg throws my screen share up. Gavin was here earlier. Top 3 team in the world last year. He's just locked at his teams. He's running 3 of them. 2 of them have Russell Antonelli with Russell as the 2. Oh, he just moved one of them. All 3 of them have Russell and Antonelli with the 2x boost on Russell. So if one of the top players in the world is behind me, I'm feeling decent. Let's see. Let's see how the next hour goes.
Oh, quick! Someone's got a double Cadillac for fixing for the full year.
For the full year.
No.
I think it's going to take Cadillac a while to move up a little bit more. But you're stuck on the price. If you're running Cadillac to have more value at the top of your team, I think the reliability will get better. You're running better drivers at the top of your team with that extra budget. I'm okay with a full year set and forget double Cadillac, but only in that case.
Right. That's it. I think we're done. I think we're here.
Everybody, enjoy qualifying. Good luck this week. Thanks so much for stopping by. We'll be back on Monday to break down the Chinese Grand Prix and get you ready for the first sprint. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you. See you all soon.